بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أحمده وأصلي على الكريم. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a man who knew things that no one knew. He understood things no one understood. And he said sallallahu alaihi wasallam, يَتَتَاوَلُونَ عَنِ الْبُنْيَانِ, they will compete with one another in making tall buildings. And you may think that, that's a good prediction. You see the tall buildings today and you're like, wow, the Prophet Muhammad predicted this, but it is deeper than that. My brothers and sisters, it is deeper than that. It is so much deeper than that. It is mind-blowing. There is something called the skyscraper effect. And the skyscraper effect is an economic indicator linking the construction of the world's tallest skyscrapers with the imminent onset of an economic recession. You see, whenever you build a tall building that is the tallest in the world, it will always be followed by the curse of an economic downfall. The theory that there's a positive correlation between the development of mega tall buildings and financial downturns was developed by the British economist Andrew Lawrence in 1999. The skyscraper effect is also known as the skyscraper index. Now let's continue, because you will learn from the Prophet ﷺ not only that there will be tall buildings, but how to predict the coming of an onset of economic collapse. Okay? So, I'm going to give you an article here about economics of skyscrapers, a synthesis. Okay? It says here, industry experts felt that its height was driven by developers' egos rather than compelling economics. Okay? History may put it in perspective too, as new record-breaking projects are already underway. So, basically what he's saying is that it doesn't seem like economics is the driving force, okay? Because the economics do not make sense, okay? And I'll give you one perspective of that, but let me just go over a few more basic articles, and then I'll give you a basic perspective on that. Opinion. Skyscrapers indicators show we're nearing a market top, okay? Just look how skyscrapers have predicted recession through history. Okay, so you build a tall building and then you can predict the recession. Okay, and let's see if I have the, so these are the different recessions that have come. The Long Depression from 1873 to 1878. Okay, this came after they made the Equitable Life building in 1873, which was 142 feet at that time. Then you have the British banking crisis in 1890 and the world recession, okay, which led to the world wars. Chicago's 269 feet auditorium building, okay, and then U.S. Panic marked by the collapse of railroad building in 1893, okay, Chicago's 302-foot tall Masonic temple, okay. Then the first stock market crash in 1901. It was after the 391 feet tall Park Row building presaged the U.S. stock market crash and panic. Okay, and it continues, and it continues, and it continues, and there is a whole book on it. Okay, the Asian economic. There are 20 cities in China that are bigger than New York. Okay, the Asian economic crisis. Okay. After the Petronas Towers were the tallest buildings in the world, okay? The dot-com bubble, okay, was when the Talapai 101 began in 1999, was completed in 2004. During the duration coincided without the recession in the early, it was the whole tech bubble that had taken place, the whole tech bubble that fell, okay? The Great Recession, okay? So you have all these tall buildings that are always followed by what? Forbes has a very good picture of this, okay? So you have the building name, you have the location, okay? and from New York to Chicago to Kuala Lumpur to Dubai, and then Dubai. Okay, and then now the world's tallest building in Saudi Arabia. If you saw my video about the loss of money that Aramco has had, the royal family's basically big pockets, they've already lost 50% of their money because of COVID. No one wants to buy the oil. Oil is not moving fast enough, and so Aramco has lost its basically its value. Now, why? It does not make economic sense. Let me explain to you one aspect of it out of many aspects of it. Let's say the first 10 floors cost price X, let's say $100, the first 10 floors. Okay, if the building is twice as tall, okay, then what will happen? If the building is twice as tall, then the floors 11 to 20 will cost 2X. Okay, so for, sorry, I made this wrong, not 3X. For 2X of 20 floors, you're paying what? You're paying 300. Okay, so you're paying equal to 300 because the first floors cost 100, the next 10 floors cost 200. So you're paying instead of 10 and 10, okay, which I'll show you here. So you're paying 10 floors, you paid extra because it was on top of it, and so you need better cranes, bigger cement systems that can now, the whole construction aspect of it alone. You need things that can reach higher. And how are you going to make living space up in the air? The 10 feet floor, okay, it's normal. But when you're going for the tallest building, you need completely new technology many times. You need completely new elevator system, elevator cables, construction of the cement, the whole system. To reach even that high, you need just new technology, okay? And so let's compare that with, for example, so over here you have, let me just signal this with this. Over here you have 20 floors, okay? This is 24 building, and the compared to this, you have 20 floors here. This will cost less because this is 1x from floor 1 to 10, and 1x from floor 1 to 10. Over here, the first 10 floors are 1x. The next 10 floors are 2x. So it's costing much more. The last 10 floors. Let's say, actually, I need to correct this here. Here, let me correct this. Okay. So it is the first 10 floors. First 10 cost, let's say 100. Then floors 11 to 20 cost 200 each. Okay, that's going to be a lot more. Okay, almost 30% more than this. Okay, but if you make 20 floors this way, it's easier. You don't need bigger cranes, bigger technology, higher heights, more insurance, more debt, more everything. Okay, so now let's now understand there's something called Keynesian economics. Okay, and I'm just going to mention this for the people that want to study this, can look at this, but I'm just going to read this. Keynesian economics is a macroeconomic theory of total spending in the economy and its effect on output. So how much are you putting in, and then how much are you going to get out? So the idea is, if I make a tall building, I'm going to put so many $1 million, and the result will be that so much more will come out. Well, Keynesian economics does not work when it comes to what? When it comes to skyscrapers. Okay, and so its effect on the output, employment, and inflation. Keynesian economics was developed by the British economist John Keynes, Kenyans, during the 1930s in an attempt to understand the Great Depression. Keynesian economics is considered a demand-side theory that focuses on changes in the economy over the short run. Keynesian theory was the first to sharply separate the study of economic behavior in markets based upon individual initiatives from the study of broad national economic aggregate variables and constructs. Okay, so for those people that get that. Now, I'm going to actually start with this. This is a man who wrote a book called The Skyscraper Curse. Okay, this is the book, The Skyscraper Curse. and how the Austrian economics predicted every major economic crisis of the last century. Okay, so he basically is here.
Minimum wage.
Okay.
My topic this afternoon is there such a thing as a skyscraper curse? Probably one of the most unusual topics at Mises University. Certainly just by looking at the titles of the talks, they're sort of more standard ones, like I did the one on the minimum wage. Is there a skyscraper curse? Well, there better be, because I just published a book on it. And if there's not, I'll see y'all later. Have a good life. I'm going to have to retire to a foreign country. Got myself extended with a printed book. Okay. Well, the skyscraper curse is defined as when a world record-setting high skyscraper sets a record. The curse is the economic crisis that follows. And the skyscraper curse comes to us from what's referred to as the skyscraper index. So if you go to Wikipedia, they have an entry on the skyscraper index, not the skyscraper curse, because the curse is really just the culmination of what's going on during the building of a record high skyscraper. This first came to light when Andrew Lawrence published a report in 1999. He's a real estate analyst for major investment houses. And when this came out, it actually made the financial press. So it was in Investors Business Daily, the Wall Street Journal, Business Week, East Asian Review, and many other publications discussed it. And they usually toss it off to the side as a story of the day, kind of cute thing, but they didn't take it very seriously. The skyscraper index is focused only on record-setting tall buildings. And specifically, I've narrowed it down so that the height of the building is measured by the top height of livable space. So if you put an antenna or a tower or some kind of architectural feature, that doesn't count. So livable space is what really matters. Putting an antenna or something on top of a building doesn't represent an engineering challenge, but building livable space 1,500 feet in the sky does cause engineering, architectural challenges that have to be met in order to build that livable space. So, for example, to build a new record high skyscraper, you might need new concrete pumping technology to get the concrete up that high in the air in an efficient manner. Or you might need some kind of new elevator. Or in the case of the current record building, a new elevator cable. The record setters are begun during a long boom in the economy. And the curse is that record setters are typically completed and open during economic crises. So the general timeline here is that there's a long boom in the economy. The record-setting skyscrapers are started. They achieve a record height, and then the economic collapse or crises begins. And then, of course, the building is only finished or completed and open to the public and tenants much later. And as a result, they often open during economic crises. So it's not overall construction or investment statistics that we want to look at here. We're looking at unique events that don't happen very often, so that we might have, say, if you saw Patrick Newman's presentation, we might have, 20 some odd recessions in the 20th century. We might only have a handful of economic crises.
Okay, so you get the point, right? So he's, of course, Lawrence wrote a book on this, and then this Mark Thornton wrote a book on this issue, and this is his book, The Skyscraper Curse. But now Dubai was the last one to make, the big tallest building in the world. And what is happening now is Dubai economy could take an 11% hit from travel and tourism. In fact, it is worse than that, because Arab Tech, the company that made Khalifa Burj, is to close down and file for bankruptcy. And this has a big effect, because when you have a tall building that you're going to make that you don't have money for, first of all, you have to borrow the money. Second of all, you might have to do some acquisitions. A few companies come together, merge together, become one big company. I don't want to go into the details of this, but basically it's a big investment. To buy the building, tallest building of the world, is not a joke. And to compete in the tallest building in the world is not a joke. And so all the technology that's needed, all the boom that's needed, all the money that's needed, they only planned this in good times, right? And only in good times will the bank be able to risk that much money. And so you get the credit, and they start making the building, and then the economy is moving because you got new IT, new technology, innovation. How do you get up high that high? Everyone's moving, everyone's active. And then as soon as you make and finish the move, as soon as you make the building, now all those people that were working, right, there's not another building. It's the world's tallest building. It's not even a building on site that's even as close as that building. Well, it will generate that type of economic boom. And so that's one thing that happens immediately with the company itself. Because if Khalifa Burj, the company Arab Tech, became X big, or let's say it was X before it started, and then when it's making the building itself, it became 10X. It's making the tallest building in the world. It hired more people, bought more things, right? Maybe bought things on loan, and it finished the tallest building in the world. Now that they got paid, they don't have that same economic activity. And so that creates an internal collapse, because you have too many people inside your own building that you have to support, and so it closes and files for liquidation. Okay, and so now Saudi Arabia is now building the world's tallest building. So tell me, what is the future of that? Imranul Bayt al-Maqdis, the building of Jerusalem on the one side, wa kharabul Yathrib. It is the coming down of Yathrib. Now, this world's tallest building, will it affect Medina? Of course it's going to affect all of Arabia. It's going to affect all of the Middle East. It's going to affect all of the Middle East. Every single time there is a high-rise building. I think people have talked about one exception to this rule, and that was the first tall-rise building. But and that's why it's interesting, because the Prophet said, when you start competing, it's not the first one. The competition begins once the second one begins, right? And so now you have an economic indicator given to you by economists, but before that, even given to you by Prophet Muhammad, that beware of this. This is a sign of the Day of Judgment. And the sign of the Day of Judgment is that, they will make tall buildings. And what did the Prophet say? Hubbud dunya wa karahiyatul maut. Love of this world and hate of death. And what creates love of world is that you make things tall in this world, like as if you're going to live here forever, right? A mu'min would never think of making the world's tallest building. It just cannot come in someone who has true iman. It just wouldn't even be a scope of their imagination, so to say, right? To build in the world like as if you're going to live here forever is never going to be in the scope of the heart of the believer. And so you have, the world's, these are the tall buildings in Saudi Arabia, which Saudi Arabia is very fond of doing, okay, which just means more economic collapse. Then you have, for example, situations where, high-rise, how 1,000 men and women worked around the clock for 5 years and lost 200 million building in a skyscraper. So sometimes the skyscraper doesn't even make money. They build it and it's there. It doesn't even make them money. And so skyscrapers are bad for the economy, they're bad for the environment, they're bad spiritually, they're the satanic model, right? To build in this world as if you're going to live here forever, to try to reach the skies the way Fir'aun wanted to when he didn't want to believe in Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. So you have like the Tower of Babel type situation here. And so the generation priced out who gets to live in urban America. As you make tall buildings, everything gets more expensive because there's more debt to be paid. And then there are more people than there are houses in the end of the day. And so this is the other thing. So think about the future of New York with all the skyscrapers. Think about the future of Chicago. Think about the future of the Arab world that's making any place, China even, okay? If they're making tall buildings, they have a bad economic future, okay? And what has happened as a result, even at the local American level, for example, okay, if I can just give you an example, okay, of this person's review of this book. This book is one of the first, if not the first, non-scholarly books focusing on the problem of high housing costs. This book has been written by, I think, a CEO of a non-profit organization that cares about high housing. Okay, Shaw explains how cities such as San Francisco have refused to allow enough new housing to keep up with job population costs, causing rents to soar. Okay, for example, Los Angeles added 160,000 new residents from 2010 to 2015, but only 25,000 housing units. Okay, so the population has increased, the housing hasn't increased. Similarly, the San Francisco area added 546,000 new jobs, but only 76 new housing units. Okay, he skillfully refutes anti-housing arguments, and it continues. But the point is that when you and so one of the solutions they have is, oh, why don't we make tall buildings? You know, people will go higher and higher, but that also increases the rent, and that's the only way you can do it in the big cities. So the big cities where people used to be able to live easily, now those prices are extremely, extremely high when it comes to this generation versus the previous generation. Okay, so what is the point of this? The point of this is that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, and he was told by Allah, يَتَتَاوَلُونَ عَنِ الْبُنْيَانِ, they will compete with one another in tall buildings, and we are competing in tall buildings like never before, like as if we're going to live on dunya forever. And these tall buildings only come with a curse, because the Prophet spoke against it. Omar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu had a fatwa of not making tall buildings during his khilafah. Okay, and he was very worried about this situation of making tall buildings and competing tall buildings. And in his mind, just in his mind, it wasn't what we have today. He was thinking, person X will compete against person Y, will compete against person Z in making tall buildings. So he didn't want that dunya. So he made a fatwa of his khilafah to not make tall buildings. Okay, now we are at an unprecedented. Omar would see the building today, and he'd be like, the day of judgment's tomorrow. Like that the day of judgment's just coming tomorrow. Right? And so I just want us to be aware of this and think about this and think about its other consequences. Who else is making tall buildings? That should give you an idea. Okay? I'm pretty sure if Imran al-Bayt al-Maqdas, the building of Jerusalem, and on the other hand you have Kharab al-Medina, the area of Medina will make the tallest buildings of the world, but Jerusalem will not make the tallest buildings of the world, or not as many at least. Okay? أقول قولي هذا أستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين والمسلمات.